Our story begins on Wednesday, the 28th of August 1833, when slavery was Yes, and propelled by such sanguine visions, he percolated into Hindustan. Yes, yes. Indeed, rich were the mines. But the Sword Fine was located in that part of Tok which was deep within the independent territory of Sindh. Though this might not have been evident to O'Shaughnessy at the time of discovery, it was certainly clear to the head assayer who had procured a remarkable map for this expedition. I cannot tell you what this realization led to, but suffice to say that the head assayer was a distant cousin of Charles Napier, who called his illegal annexation of Sindh that very year
a noble piece of rascality.
With possession of the mines now secure, William O'Shaughnessy embarked upon the greatest mining endeavor of 19th century India. Teams of workers were conscripted and local barbers coerced to dig the first exploratory shafts. Teakwood trunks from the vasta forests were dragged like a giant caterpillar, to be hewn into shacks and offices, and to shore the mud and rock of the tunnels being dug. Geologists, cavalrymen and medical practitioners, telegraph operators, wiremen, electricians, bankers, hostelers and camp cooks, entertainers and crooks, all descended upon the site as the first tunnels were inaugurated. Of what use are exact dates and years? Does it not suffice to say that the mines, which were as yet shallow, only about 30 feet deep, had already begun to yield great numbers of telephones, some small and delicate, and some as large as an elephant. Observation decks and elevator shafts were built. Great rotating wheels were erected to pump air into the mines. For one whole week, a train of camels unloaded brass lamps from the ore that was stored in a newly built warehouse. Clothing karkhanas were set up that worked tar soap jute into hard shoes for the miners and made cotton scarves for the supervising Europeans. Elephants were shipped to the inhospitable desert at great cost to help pull and tug the telephones from their ponic bed. Yes, the people, the well mining crews from Srinagar and Burma, from Ceylon and Hampi and Kadirmuga, started to descend upon the settlement, and were readily hired. Abutting their mine shafts, there erupted countless hovels of worker colonies, or what were to be later called khanparas, and a little removed from the mines, there arose larger buildings for quarters and offices, churches and workshops, each a thin-walled ramshackle structure that poked into the sky. Until from the nothingness of the desert, there emerged a misshapen town. William O'Shaughnessy, who was appointed Director General of Telegraphs for his discovery of the Bakelite pits, received a knighthood in 1866 for the telephone mines. And though he left the town a little after its founding, he gave a name to the settlement, calling it Telephone Nagar. And with newfound prosperity, there appeared like a tide of locusts hordes of officers and revenue clerks, managers and traders, accountants and munshi, members of that peculiar race who speak both Firangi and Hindustani. A race of administrative service officers, the lower magistrates and the adjunct collectors. Indians who had been trained abroad for just such tasks of collating the whims of change. This new and formless settlement attracted them, this absence of discrete boundaries. Where else could you live in such proximity to the British, the Dutch or the Americans who worked alongside them? Where else were you allowed to so clearly see what being an equal might be like? Not that they were equal. There were separate living quarters, of course, separate methods and places of worship, and even separate streets. But to be so close to the foreigners was exhilarating. Perhaps they were foolish. But remark these men, for they are crucial to our tale. It was these men, these officers of the company, who on a borderless land discovered a finite margin. For it was against the nebulous assault of sand and mud, and the uncertainties of the mining pits, that they could delineate their own form and purpose. Somehow the harsh land erased other loyalties and helped keep the delicate balance of their lives in careful accord with their rulers. To this strange milieu arrived Iqbal. Yes, Iqbal the barrister, Iqbal the revolutionary, Iqbal the unfortunate, or simply Iqbal. He came to this town riding a roving tide of humanity and attempting to efface the terrible years he had spent at Hertfordshire, before being appointed the administrator of the Ambrose Shaft, the deepest active mine at Telephone. Save for his morning rounds, Iqbal rarely went to the actual mine. The rest of the day he spent in the cavernous records hall, maintaining a careful roster for the teams under his charge. It is the same hall that you haunt today, turning such records as have survived into paper planes in your boredom. Perhaps it was the emptiness of this hall when the rest of the town was crowded. But something gave Iqbal room to ponder. Why was the telephone mined in only a single language, he wondered. Each telephone, once extracted, was refined and processed such that it would only allow English to be spoken through its receiver. Yes, they may have been forgotten. But Iqbal believed that some small change in the refinement or extraction process might be enough to yield a modern Bakelite telephone that could speak in many languages, perhaps even all of them. Such radical thoughts he kept to himself. And, when time permitted, he experimented, for his was the legacy of O'Shaughnessy, and he found it easy to bend wires and tubes to his will. And much as O'Shaughnessy had done, he too began to think of the world as a porous body waiting to be punctured by cables and pipes carrying blood and sound. Reticent though he was, word of Iqbal's experiments percolated through the town and roused a deep anxiety in his fellow officers. Those who had prided themselves on their certainties saw in Iqbal's endeavor a malevolent threat to their way of life, for their certainties were born of a particular kind of fear. The telephone was a sacred emblem of their station as the chosen ones. They feared its proliferation and they feared its authority. To so debase such an august instrument was tantamount to sacrilege, of this they were certain. Yes, it does. And at Telefonica, this bar. The next day, with forced joviality, lest the sight of the bar animated the memory of his murder. I do not know, Sahib. All I can recall is Iqbal also awaited a phone call, in the empty town of Telephone Nagar, that he too awaited a release from this purgatory that was to be heralded by a ringing, to which he would say,